On? Off. Okay.
Joe was very involved in politics. Excuse me. He was the county manager for one of the for the Steve. I can't remember his last name. Anyway, H.R. Gross was our representative from our county in Iowa, and Steve ran. He was retiring, and Chuck Grassley was Gross's chosen, and so Steve was the Democrat and Chuck Grassley was the Republican, and Joe was his Cerro campaign manager, Oh, wow. If that didn't get to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And, Chuck's now a big senator and all of this stuff. But then Joe also wrote the social plank for the Democratic Party for the state of Iowa one year. We went to caucuses and we did all of those things. We were very involved. And, of course, he was a park commissioner. He won that. Mm-hmm. And his mother was involved in politics, and she had tea parties for people and everything. And one of the big name protesters for the Vietnam War was a Catholic priest named Father Berrigan. And she had a couple of teas at her house for Father Berrigan, and Joe worked for the area political, there's a name for it, but anyway. Excuse me. The political group, where they lived. I've been very active in special ed laws and both in Iowa and here. So, for licensure and for speech path people. So I have been active at the state level, and I didn't even have any idea that we could do that. That who are we to get involved in politics, And Joe just said, "Oh well, let's do that."
Yes, we will.
Yes, we will, and it was not a big deal.
Yeah, you just did.
It was just like
did.
Everybody else was just like us, just normal people going and doing their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good. Mm-hmm. We were at the caucus, in fact, when Robert Kennedy, the primary in Iowa is really one of the big primaries, mm-hmm. and Robert Kennedy and Jimmy Carter were the candidates for that primary, and Robert Kennedy came in and treated all of the people like farmers.
Mm.
And that's why Jimmy Carter got Iowa, and eventually got of course, Robert Kennedy was killed before the election, but Jimmy Carter won Iowa over Robert Kennedy because he was such a snob. Mm. And those boys are in Iowa. I'll tell you, those people are not unsophisticated. They may be farmers, but they're not unsophisticated. Mm. And they just went.
Not having that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting to be involved in that one.
Have you ever been involved in any kind of a protest where you opposed
when
much
we were
of
in
the
Iowa
war?
City with Joe Good and his masters, and social work, mm-hmm. was right in the middle of the Vietnam protesters, and Iowa City was just a big place that it was happening. So for one of his classes, he had to go observe a protest and write a report on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened that that protest then got on national television, and there's Joe in that protest, but he was there as an observer. But that's the one where the policeman hit the woman in the stomach who was pregnant, and they got it on film.
And he was right there.
And he was standing right there when that happened.
Hmm.
So, but there were a lot of arrests that eventually went to court there, but I think only 2 of them ever were given sentences. There were one of them was one group of people were convicted of conspiracy because they had set this whole thing up, and which, you know, in protest that's what you do. You do it. But there was some element of their planning that became legally conspiracy. So they were the only ones that I ever saw doing that. But I've done some protests. When I was first married, we were in Florida. And I have more electricity in my body. I know that sounds funny, but it's true. I have more electricity in my body than most people do.
Higher frequency. That's.
And they used to have, you know, wind clocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gotten this watch for a wedding present,
Mm-hmm.
and it not only stopped, it ran backwards sometimes. And I took it in the jeweler, and he said, "Well, you've been by a great big machine somewhere with it. It's been magnetized. We'll demagnetize it." And I didn't know about this other stuff, you know. So I got it back, and it worked for 3 days, and then it did it again. And he said, "Well, it's not going to help it if you keep going by this big machine." I said, "I haven't been by big machines, you know." And he wouldn't give me any satisfaction. And so there were about 5 of us who went and we made little cards like this and said, "This jeweler is unfair to airman wives."
Ah.
And I went and stood there for an hour. He got really
Yeah.
upset, but I had called and found that we could do that without any problem.
Uh-huh.
We just stood there with our little cards.
Boycotting the jeweler.
Yeah, and it wasn't even his fault. I didn't find that out for years. But one of the most one of the things that I was involved with here, I didn't actually protest, but when I came to Utah from Iowa, they were still teaching to the old stereotypes. Even if they had a preschool handicap program, they were still teaching to the old stereotypes that this is what's going to happen to this kid, you know, and we'll just do this and this. Which we had found that was not true, you know, in the work that I'd done there. So I took my little magic show of the kids with Down syndrome and went all over the state showing them what could happen, and one of the parents who came to one of those meetings was yes, Bunny. Anyway, she had a daughter who has autism, and her son had drowned. She had one daughter who was normal, and then Katie and her son had drowned. And we just hit it off really well. Kay Bailey was her name. And her husband's an attorney. And she had been Governor Matheson's the manager of his election committee.
Oh.
And so she knew everybody.
Hmm.
So they had 6 preschool handicap programs in Utah when I came back. And there's only one of them that I saw. Oh, and they had more than that. They had probably 12 because some of the school districts had them. But there was only one of them that I saw that wasn't teaching the old stereotypes of saying, this is what we got, you know, da-da-da.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed, this was a guy who had a private program, but it was a private nonprofit. I showed him that and he said, show me how to train my teachers. So we did that. And then I just took it to all kind of people and showed them. So then Kay said we need more preschools and we need a model for the state. So I was working at the training school and they told us if we were in anything, if we were political, you know, more than voting, we would be fired. Mm. And so this was all on the side, and it was okay for me to take my slide tape around, but you know, that was okay. So Kate